Sure. So I think there's a fair amount of excitement about the similarity of the studies and the way they've been able to be presented in this kind of similar parallel fashion. Because it is always a problem in social science in general that when you see one study in one place, one point in time, you always want to know, well, how pervasive will these results be in multiple contexts? But yet that type of replication is not rewarded in academia, unfortunately. And so what we have here is a really unique opportunity where these 6 groups were working independent of each other, but on a very similar problem. And I really applaud the effort here. Esther Duflo led this, bringing the papers together, getting them to be with parallel structure and outcomes makes it really user-friendly for the reader to see what are the commonalities and where are the differences across these studies. And we just don't usually get that. You have to spend a lot more time kind of digging in, piecing together, comparing across studies where things aren't as comparably presented. And so that's just a huge, huge exciting innovation, oddly. I mean, it's an odd term to use perhaps for it, but it is an innovation in the publication process. My dream is that in 10 or 20 years, there will be several more examples of this type of replication and replicated work kind of presented side by side, published together. And also it's a great opportunity for other scholars to now download the data from the 6 studies and have that kind of parallel nature and be able to do a lot more work to understand what the patterns are that are true across these different settings. No, there was no planning way in advance. It was actually more of a byproduct of seeing that independently there were these 6 studies. We were aware of all of them, and every one of these studies was trying to get published by saying how they were so magically different than the other 5, but of course that's just not the case. And that was when we had this kind of realization that we really should put them together, that the strength is in the commonality across the 6, and that needs to be highlighted rather than downplayed. I don't think we necessarily, I don't think I had a hope ahead of time. In fact, that's one of the reasons we do this style research, is because at least I try to be as agnostic as I can beforehand. It's not to say there isn't some ideas that you kind of gravitate to and like or not. But here, this is a case where we just really wanted to know that this is a popular tool. It has been both applauded and vilified, and it's begging us for research to find out what is, should we be applauding it? Should we be vilifying it? Or is it somewhere in between? And the answer, of course, is that it's somewhere in between, that it is mostly generating positive benefits, but not transformational for the most part, a few pockets here and there. And that the investor should be happy to be investing and feel good about the positive impact. The donors who started it years ago should be quite proud of having created the industry and having all these investors now following. But it also should open up the door to innovators saying, wait a second, this isn't what we had once hoped it would be in terms of alleviating poverty. So we get that it's still doing good, but it's not doing everything we had hoped. So what should we do? And that's where a lot of the conversations are this afternoon. What should we do? What's next? Is it a different style lending? Is it savings? Is it insurance? And that's where we're seeing now a huge new body of work coming out. And maybe in a few years we'll end up with a similar special issue with a commonality of insurance products or a commonality of savings products, published side by side to understand where, again, those commonalities are and differences are within that product spectrum. So one of the commonalities among these 6 that we saw is the rigidity. In fact, most of them are even group lending, which is even more rigid than an individual loan. And so one of the areas that we are seeing innovation, we've already seen some work and we're starting to see more, is on the flexibility of the lending product design. And specifically when we say flexibility, we're often talking about the repayment structure. When is repayment due? And so I think that has particular promise, but we'll need to see. There is clearly trade-offs that could happen, and we need to understand better what those trade-offs are. There's also work to be done on savings and insurance, because we do see there's many situations where people are using loans in ways that really smell like absorbing risk. So why not give an insurance product? Or they're using loans in a way that was a totally predictable expenditure where you ask yourself, why didn't you save up for that? So maybe it's about the access to the savings product or the right type of savings product. So something along the lines of commitment savings might have much more hope. And in fact, we have done studies on commitment savings and found considerable impacts. And it's kind of obvious from the cash flow perspective that if you can help someone save up for something rather than borrow down, at the end of the day, they'll probably end up with more money because they didn't spend all of that money on interest expense. No, because it's also making credit cheaper too. So I think what we'll see from all these innovations in digital is just overall we'll see a more proliferation of financial services for the poor as prices just come down for everything. It will be digital. It will. So I think with that you'll see much more rapid fire proliferation, more testing, and we'll probably see a lot more product variation because it's that much easier to roll out different types of products. No, I'm not sure what conference that question came from because I heard the question too, and there's not a single presentation that was made that should lead to the conclusion that microcredit is dead. So I think that question came from someone who kind of walked in with that question ahead of hearing the results and just asked it anyhow. Well, I think it's gone away, the idea that merely giving people access to credit will transform lives on average and uplift everyone out of poverty. That has gone away. But that doesn't mean microcredit is dead, and that was the question that was asked. Well, I think the beauty of it really should be, so take the Spondana results. The Spondana deliberately does not say what you have to do with the money or not. Yet they do see money going into the enterprise, so it's not, my instinct is that the bank should not be demanding that it's used for a certain thing, because when it does, that doesn't mean it's going to change what really happens. That's just going to change what they're told people are doing with the loan. And if someone is made better off by using it to absorb a shock or some consumption, well, let's let that happen. And that's some of what we see. You know, it's just not the canonical story of enterprise, but that doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, quite the opposite. I would say that's a good thing.